So it's Yom Kippur tonight, just a few hours away, and I'm preparing my sermons, and I figured I'll do it together with you. And thank you for being here. And we'll see how it goes. Still very raw. I'm always concerned about, when I prepare something and then the delivery of it. Like there's two elements. There's the preparation of the story, and then there is the delivery of that story. So we'll see what we can do. So this is going to be the one that I'm planning on using for Neilah tomorrow night. And I'm entitling it the even if principle, a new approach to life. Let's be real. I don't have to tell you. The past year has been intense. It's been excruciating. It's been extraordinary for the Jewish people. We've faced immense challenges, but we've also seen incredible strength. I'm constantly this year reminded of a powerful story from the book of Daniel, a story that even after all these years, I think, you can tell me if I'm wrong, I think it still resonates with the challenges that we face today. So let me give you the background. Daniel and his era, it takes us back to the days of the Babylonian Empire. The king, his name is Nebuchadnezzar. I think all we know about him today is that if you buy like one of those 15-liter bottles of wine, they're called Nebuchadnezzar's. That's about it. Apparently, he likes big bottles of wine. At the time, he's the most powerful man in the entire world. He had built a colossal golden statue, 9 stories high. He calls everyone together for the grand ceremony. And at the ceremony, he issues a command. He says, when the music plays, everyone must bow down and worship this idol. Anyone who refuses will be thrown into a fiery furnace. He's Nebuchadnezzar, and that's his decree. The music plays, and the people bowed. Everyone except for 3 young Jewish men, Chananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. If this is the first time you heard these names, you should look them up. Because these men were not just ordinary men. They were exiles from Israel who had risen to become officials in the king's court. But when faced with a choice between betraying their faith or facing death, they stood tall. They refused to bow. They remembered where they came from and to whom they prayed. Nebuchadnezzar was furious. He called them in. He gave them one last chance: bow down now or be thrown into the flames. These 3 young men, they stood before the king, faced with a choice that has echoed throughout history. And they said, "O king, your threats cannot shake us. Our God is able to deliver us from that blazing furnace." But what they said next is perhaps the most extraordinary declaration of faith in all religious literature. They said, "Ve'hein lo," even if what? Even if he doesn't, we will not bow. Did you catch that? Even if, 2 words. In those 2 words, we find a faith that stands when all else fails. It's a faith that doesn't depend on favorable outcomes, that doesn't waver in the face of fire. It's the kind of faith that rests not on what happens to us, but an underlying commitment to what is right, no matter what the consequences are, even in the face of death. It's a faith that stands strong when everything else crumbles. It's a faith that says, even if I will not bow, even if I will not surrender, It is sure of itself, regardless of the outcome. Over the past year, I've often found myself returning to that story from Daniel, those powerful words, even if. Since October 7th, since the Jewish people have endured a day of unspeakable horror, 1,200 lives lost in the bloodiest days since the Holocaust, Israel's defenses were overwhelmed, the intelligence network faltered, and the nation left exposed to a terror that we hadn't seen in generations. But what prevented the massacre from spreading further? Over 5,000 heavily armed terrorists breached Israel's borders, carrying maps, specific targets in Tel Aviv, in other major cities. So what stopped them? There was one factor those terrorists did not anticipate, and that was the courage of thousands of ordinary civilians, grandparents, parents, teenagers, who ran toward danger, not away from it. They ran toward danger, not away from it. They didn't hesitate. They didn't wait for training. They didn't wait for orders. They just acted. They prayed for deliverance, hoped for reinforcements, but like those 3 men in Babylon, they resolved that even if the IDF does not come, we will stand our ground for the Jewish people. Even if the miracle we seek is denied, we will not bow to evil. Many of those brave souls paid with their lives, but their sacrifice was not in vain. Their courage provided the Israeli army with the critical time that they needed to regroup and eliminate the threat, saving countless lives. The legacy of their heroism is written in the lives of those who live and laugh and love at this very moment because of their actions. I want to share a story with you of one of those ordinary heroes, a man who didn't bow, Oz Davidian. He's a farmer who lives near Gaza. And on the morning of October 7th, Oz and his family were jolted awake by the sounds of air raid sirens. Like so many others, they huddled in their home's protected space, praying for safety. But then, Oz got a message. His brother-in-law, just down the road from the Nova Music Festival, sent a plea on WhatsApp. There are tons of wounded kids here. Who can help? And Oz, at that moment, was faced with a choice. He could stay. He could be safe. He could wait for help to arrive. Or he could be one of those who help those who need. And Oz made his choice. Without a second thought, he jumped into his truck and he drove straight into danger. Bullets were flying. People lay all around, injured and terrified, but Oz did not turn back. He threw himself into the chaos, rescuing the wounded and ferrying them to safety in his truck. As a farmer, Oz knew those back roads like the back of his hand, and he skillfully weaved through the dirt paths, even as the bullets whizzed past him. Dash cam footage that you can see if you want from his Jeep plays out like a war zone. Shots ringing out from every direction and burning cars transforming the road into a death trap. In the midst of this hellish fray, there stood Oz, an ordinary farmer, with his rifle in hand, firing back with determination. His voice cuts through the chaos, shouting urgently to those he attempted to save, "Watch out! Duck!" After that first trip, Oz had every reason to retreat to the relative safety of his home shelter. He had seen with his own eyes the immensity of the danger that we would only find out later. He knew that. And what did he do? What did he do? He had already done his part. He had done more than anyone could ever have asked him. He knew that if he drove back towards Gaza, he may not return home alive. But Uz did not stand down. He went back not once, he went back again and again, 15 times in all. Each time, more and more, he understood the stakes. Each time, he knew he might not survive. And Uz did not relent. He had that even if faith, just as Chananiah, Mishael, and Azariah stood firm in the face of the fiery Babylon furnace. Uz confronted the modern furnace of Hamas with an incredible resolve. Even if the IDF never arrived, he would not surrender. He refused to bow to darkness. And because of that unstoppable faith, he ferried 120 people to safety. And they're all alive today. Heroes like Uz are extraordinary. They inspire us with their courage. They inspire us with their selflessness. And it reminds us what's possible if we give everything we've got. But as we think of them on Yom Kippur, their actions also pose a question to each of us. Maybe a question that sometimes we're afraid to ask, a question that we're afraid to face. We exile them, we hide them. The question of what kind of faith do we have? Is it the even if kind of faith? The unshakable faith that pushes through, that endures, that lights up the world? Or is it the kind that only stays strong when life is easy, when the path is smooth? I've thought about this. I'm maybe a little ahead of you because I had to prepare this sermon, but not that much ahead of you, because I was thinking about what would be something that we should speak about on Yom Kippur, and I feel like this is an important conversation. So and this is only really a work in progress, but what I'm thinking is that there's two types of faith. There's an if, and there's an even if. So the if kind of faith is if everything goes well, if my prayers are answered, then I'll believe in God. Then I'll stay committed. Then I'll be a mitzvah machine. And then there's the unconditional faith, a faith that's only strong when the seas are calm and the winds are in your favor. That's what the if faith is. Sorry, not an unconditional, it's a conditional faith. It's a conditional faith, a faith that's just when everything is going well, I believe, or maybe I don't believe. It's an if. If it's going well, if my prayers are answered, if. And then there's a second kind of faith, even if. Even if it doesn't go the way I planned. Even if I face challenges and setbacks. Even if I don't understand what God is doing, I'm still going to believe. I'm still going to stand strong. So there's an if and there's an even if. And I think the Torah, if you look at it, is filled of examples of this contrast. I want to just give you a few. Jacob, he's running away from his brother Esau. He wants to kill him. He makes a conditional vow to God. It says, Im yeh Elokim imati. If you will be with me and protect me, if you provide for me, then you will be my God. It's very clear in the Torah that his faith is contingent on assurances of favor and the guarantees of deliverance. There's another one in the book of Judges. One of the judges, his name was Gideon. So he said, Im yishcha Moshia biyadi. God, if you will be with me and help me win the war, then I will do what you ask. And this kind of faith that might not survive the fiery furnace of life. It's the if faith. But listen to the other kind of faith. Who is this faith? The faith of the person to whom most of our prayers are written by. Of course. If you look at the Yom Kippur Machzor or the Siddur, you're going to see most of the prayers are written by him. The faith of King David. What does he say? Gam ki elech begates hamavet. Even if I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Probably the most famous prayer. Just about anybody who's ever prayed it anywhere can recite that verse. This is the faith that draws its strength, not from the absence of danger, but from the presence of God within it. A faith that transforms fear into courage, that transcends circumstance because it is grounded and it's unshakable. It has a sense of difference between right and wrong. Or there's another line, not as well known, but from the prophet Habakkuk. He says that even in the face of barren fields, of starvation, he said, Ki te'ena loi tefarach. Even if the olive crop falls and the fields produce no food, yet I will rejoice in God. Even if. Here's the faith that doesn't waver, even in the most challenging of circumstances. It's anchored in a deeper truth, a truth that endures beyond the material world. And then, of course, there's the great Queen Esther, a young Jewish woman who found herself in a position of influence in the Persian Empire, the original Iran. Imagine a Jew in the high ranking of Iran. When a decree was issued to annihilate the Jews, Esther was faced with an impossible choice. Stay silent, stay hidden, stay safe behind the palace walls, or live out her days in comfort and splendor. Or does she risk everything by revealing her identity as a Jew? Esther knew that approaching the king uninvited could mean her death, but she also knew that remaining silent would be doom for her people. And with the courage that has inspired generations, what does she say? V'cha'asher avadati avadati. Even if I die, I die. Even if I die, I die. And she walked into the king's chamber, not because she was certain of success, but because she understood the moral imperative to stand up no matter the cost. This is the even if sort of faith, the kind of faith that has carried the Jewish people through centuries of persecution. It transformed impossible situations into the triumphs of Jewish history. And from the courage of King David to the bravery of Queen Esther, and right up into the modern heroism of Oz Davidon, the countless of others. Stories that we could just be here for days talking about. People who came to the rescue of their fellows in the face of unthinkable danger. This faith isn't dependent on blessings. It's not dependent on miracles. No. This is the faith that stands strong, even in the furnaces of history's darkest moments. This even if mindset, it's not just reserved for moments of crisis. It reaches into our everyday lives. It reaches into our love, into our relationships. I'll give you an example. There's a story of a young soldier stationed in Georgia during World War II. With some time on his hands, he wanders into a library and he picks up a book. And as he read, he noticed something intriguing. There were thoughtful notes that were scribbled in the margins. His curiosity piqued. He checked the front of the book and found a name and address, Susie, from New York City. And on her whim, he wrote her a letter, introducing himself and mentioning that he was about to be shipped off to Europe. And he invited her to write back if she felt inclined. To his surprise, Susie did write back. And over the next 13 months, they exchanged letters, getting to know each other through the words on a page. They were falling in love, even though they had never met. When he asked for a picture, Susie declined. But his return to the U.S. drew near, and they arranged to meet in New York. He promised to take her out for dinner, and she told him, "I'll be waiting for you when you get off the ship. You'll know it's me by the pink rose I'll be wearing." The day came. He stepped off the ship. His heart was racing. He was excited but nervous. And then he saw her. Beautiful young woman, elegant and poised. But as she passed by, she realized she wasn't wearing a pink rose. Just then, a woman approached him. Well, not quite what he had expected. She wasn't as young as he had imagined, and she was wearing a pink rose. Smiling, he walked up to her, saluted, and said, "Hello, ma'am. You must be Susie. I'm so glad to meet you. Can I take you for dinner?" The woman looked at him and said, "Son, I'm not sure what's going on, but the young lady who just passed you asked me to wear this pink rose. She said if you invited me to dinner, to tell you that she's waiting for you at the restaurant across the way." See, Susie wanted to know something deeper. Was his love built on appearances or something more? Was it one of those if loves, or a love that works only if everything is perfect? Or was it something else? But here's the truth. Those perfect moments don't reveal much about love, do they? They might look like love, but sometimes it's a little if-y. Real love, like real faith, it isn't conditional. It doesn't depend on the perfect circumstances. It's built on the strength of even if life gets messy, even if the world falls apart, love like faith endures. And just like faith is tested by fire, love is tested, distilled, and sharpened by life's challenges, revealing its true strength in the process. But I'm not going to stop here. We have to go even further. The even if mindset is not limited to faith or even love. It extends to something equally important: everyday happiness. True happiness, like true faith, like true love, does not depend on external conditions. It's built on even if life veers from the path we expect, even if challenges arise, true happiness still endures. Take a look at the word life. Right in the middle of the word life is, that's right, if. Over the course of our lives, we will deal with those big ifs. They are the features, not the bugs, of our time on this planet. So often we tell ourselves, if my partner were perfect, if my kids appreciated me more, if my job paid more, if my health was better, if things were different, then I'd be happy. But here's the truth. Life will never be perfect. If happiness depends on perfect circumstances, there's always going to be an if standing in the way. And that's why this little word if is the enemy of happiness. It keeps you stuck. It keeps you focused on what you don't have instead of appreciating what you do. It keeps you focused on what is missing instead of what you can create. But the even if mindset, it changes everything. When you say, even if my spouse isn't perfect, I'm still going to love them. Even if my kids aren't exactly how I imagined, I'm still going to cherish them. Even if my job isn't my dream, I'm still going to find purpose and passion in it. That's the mindset that breaks through. And so, let us live life, the life God meant for us. One full of meaning, and yes, one full of joy. And tonight, as we gather on the threshold of a new year, there's a beautiful tradition. We have a practice on Yom Kippur to take on a new mitzvah, to take on a sacred commitment that adds depth, that adds meaning to our lives. But tonight, I want you to think about it a little differently. We've all had those moments when we've delayed acting, when we've waited for the perfect time, the right feeling, the ideal circumstance. If I had more time, I'd visit the sick. If I felt more inspired, I'd pray more. Maybe I'd even put on tefillin if that's something I do. If my life felt more settled, I'd observe Shabbat. But if is a thief. It steals our joy. It robs our soul of the opportunity to grow. It's going to keep you from the person you'll become. So tonight, I want to invite each of us to take on a mitzvah, not in the comfort of if, but in the courage of even if. Even if your time is limited, there's always room to extend a hand to those in need. Even if the inspiration feels distant, take a few moments each day to pray. Consider the mitzvah of tefillin, an act that connects you and God in a tangible way. It binds you to the sacred chain of our ancestors, linking past, present, future in a single unbroken line of faith. Shabbat candles has that same feeling. It binds you to the sacred chain. And even if Shabbat feels daunting, begin with one small act. Just light the candles. Embrace the stillness, even if just for a moment. Because real growth, real transformation doesn't happen in the comfort of if. It happens in the courage of even if. When we push ourselves, when we take those steps forward, even when everything is far from perfect, that's when life truly begins to change. That's how we deepen our love. That's how we strengthen our relationships. And that's how we rediscover our happiness. In Judaism, faith is not about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about creating sacred moments, even in the midst of life's imperfections. We create these moments. And it's there. It's the act of committing to growth, even if circumstances are challenging. We find the divine, even if it's not the right thing, even if there's so many other excuses. When my daughter was little, she asked me with a smile, "Daddy, when you're asleep, you can wake up, right? But when you're awake, can you wake up even more?" I think about that sometimes. That's Yom Kippur right there. Even if you're awake, it's time to wake up more. My blessing to you tonight is may we move in from the if into the even if. There's so many moments in our lives that are even if moments. Hashem knows those moments and knows the struggle. We all have our own struggles. We all have so many different parts. And Hashem knows how difficult it is for some of us. And when we bring all of the parts of ourselves into these moments. And it doesn't have to be this grandiose thing, just a little moment, a little even if. Don't have to be the great courage, just a little bit. When Hashem sees that, such a beauty. Hashem says, give me a finger and I will open up like the eye of a needle to myriads and myriads. Hashem wants us just to give a little bit, just the eye of a needle. So Hashem should bless you, that you should have the strength, the courage, and the conviction to give a little bit. And with that, Hashem should seal us for a year that is abundant, both physically, emotionally, and spiritually. A year that is filled with blessings that are truly sweet, because sweetness is not subjective. We all love the sweetness, sometimes too much. And Hashem should give that sweetness to us in abundance this year. Gemar Chatima Tova.